"Don't go back to the house tonight," the girl said. She was 11 years old and she was pulling his sleeve with both hands, and her eyes were the kind of frighten that doesn't perform itself. "Please, Mr. Sutherland." "I heard them. You can't go back." Warren Sutherland looked down at her. He was 63 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years reading people, witnesses, juries, opposing counsel, partners who smiled too long at the wrong moment. He had built one of the largest corporate law firms in Vancouver out of a single rented office on Hastings Street and a reputation for seeing through things. Before other people knew there was anything to see through. He was not by any reasonable measure a man who startled easily. But something in the girl's face stopped him entirely. Her name was Bea. No, that wasn't right. He met her properly only 2 days before, when his wife Sylvia had brought her home from the community fundraiser on Granville Island. The girl's family had fallen on hard times. Her mother, a quiet woman named Autolus, had been laid off from the cannery in Delta 6 months earlier, and was doing contract cleaning work to keep them in their suite on East 41st. The fundraiser had paired struggling families with volunteers for a week of mentorship and activities. Sylvia had arranged for the girl to spend 3 afternoons at their Shaughnessy home, helping in the garden, seeing how things were done. The girl's name was Petra. No, he was misremembering again. She had corrected him gently the first afternoon. "My name's Nell," she'd said. "Nell Okafor." He had shaken her hand with the same formality he extended to new articling students. She had seemed quietly pleased by that. Now it was Thursday evening, and Nell Okafor was gripping the cuff of his coat outside the Safeway on West 49th and telling him not to go home. Warren had stopped to buy ginger ale on the way back from the firm. He did this sometimes when the day had gone long, and his stomach felt the way it had since February. Tight, unsettled, the kind of low-grade unease he had attributed to stress and the acquisition negotiations with the Calgary firm and the cold rain that had not let up in 6 weeks. Sylvia called it his gentleman's anxiety. He had not bothered to push back on the label. He had been walking through the parking lot with his paper bag when Nell appeared from behind a concrete pillar near the cart return. She looked like she had been waiting there. She looked like she had been crying, though she had done a careful job of trying to hide it. "Nell," he said, "what are you doing here?" "How did you get here?" "I walked," she said. "I know where you live. I walked the other way until I found the grocery store. Does your mother know where you are?" "She thinks I'm at Kezia's." She swallowed. "I need you to listen to me. I know you don't have any reason to, but I need you to." Warren set the paper bag on the trunk of a nearby car and gave her his full attention. This was something he had trained himself to do 40 years ago and had never stopped practicing. Full attention. No performance of it. No glancing at a phone that wasn't there. Just the eyes, the posture, the complete and undivided self. "Tell me," he said. He had hired Sylvia as a junior associate 27 years ago. She was brilliant. Not in the showy way, not the kind of brilliant that needed a room to know it was there, but the kind that revealed itself in the margins of documents at 2 in the morning, in the single question she would ask in a meeting that reframed everything everyone else had been saying for an hour. He had fallen in love with her before he understood what was happening, and he had handled it with the particular clumsiness of a man who had spent his entire adult life being competent, which meant he handled it badly and then apologized. At length, in a letter he was embarrassed to have written, and which she had kept, she told him later, in her desk drawer for 4 years. They had been married for 22 years. He thought about that while Nell talked. She had been helping in the greenhouse on Tuesday afternoons, the small glass structure at the far end of the Sutherland property, where Sylvia kept her orchids and started her tomato seedlings in March. Nell had gone out there to water the seedlings, the way Sylvia had shown her, because Sylvia had left early for a meeting and had asked her to manage it. Nell had left the door partly open because the afternoon had briefly warmed, and the voices from the kitchen window which faced the back garden had drifted out to her without any effort on her part to hear them. She had not understood everything. She was 11, and the words were not always words she knew. But she understood enough. There was a man. He had a name she hadn't caught, but his voice was low and had a particular quality. She described it to Warren as flat, the way a voice sounds when the person talking has decided something already and isn't discussing it. He had been talking to Sylvia. Nell had recognized Sylvia's voice without any question. They were talking about money, a lot of money, an amount that came up more than once, and that made Nell's stomach feel wrong, she said, even before she understood why, and they were talking about Warren. She said. Nell stopped. She looked at the gray sky above the parking lot. She looked back at him. She said you were the problem, that with you gone, everything could be restructured, that the firm would go to her and to the other partner. She said the timing had to be right because of the estate documents. Warren was very still, and the man said he understood. He said it would look. She pressed her lips together. He said it would look natural. He said that was extra. She said she knew. The paper bag with the ginger ale was still sitting on the trunk of someone's car. Warren looked at it for a moment as if he had forgotten what it contained. "Which partner?" he said. His voice was even. 40 years of courtrooms. "I don't know." She didn't say a name. She just said he already knows, like the person already knew. Thus, Warren's firm had two named partners. One was himself. The other was a man named Jeffrey Ashcroft, whom he had known since law school, who had been the best man at his wedding, who had held his hand in the hospital waiting room in 2019, when Warren had gone in for the cardiac catheterization that turned out to be unnecessary, who had sent flowers when Warren's mother died in Kelowna, who had driven 4 hours through a snowstorm to deliver them in person because that was the kind of man Jeffrey Ashcroft was, or had seemed to be for 31 years. Warren looked at Nell. "Did you hear anything else?" "A date," she said. "The end of the month." She said end of the month for sure, because that's when your business trip is, because you'd be away from home and it would be— She stopped again. I don't remember the words she used. "I'm sorry." "It's all right. I'm not lying to you," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. "I know why you might think I'm just a kid. And I heard something wrong. I know that. But I've been scared since Tuesday, and I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't tell my mom because she'd think I was making it up. And I couldn't go to the police, because what would I say? And you're the only—" She stopped, steadied herself. "You're the only person I could think of who would actually listen." Warren Sutherland stood in a Safeway parking lot on West 49th Avenue in Vancouver on a Thursday evening in April and felt the particular coldness of a truth arriving that cannot be unfelt once it has arrived. He had been a lawyer for 40 years. He knew the weight of testimony. He knew the difference between a person performing distress and a person carrying it. Nell Okafor was not performing anything. "Okay," he said quietly. "You did the right thing." He did not go home. He called a colleague. Not Jeffrey, not anyone at the firm. A woman named Harriet Svensson, who had retired from the RCMP the previous year and now ran a private consultation practice out of an office in Kitsilano. They had worked together on 3 cases over the years. He trusted her the way he trusted very few people, based on observable evidence over a long period of time. He called her from the parking lot while Nell sat on a bench near the entrance, drinking the ginger ale he had opened for her. "I need to talk to you tonight," he said when Harriet answered. "Off the record until I decide otherwise. Is this the kind of thing I should bring a recorder for?" "Probably." There was a pause. "I can be at the Granville Island office by 8. Good." He looked across the parking lot at Nell, who was looking at the sky again with her hands wrapped around the can. "I'm bringing someone with me. She's 11. She's the witness." Another pause. "Okay," Harriet said. "I'll get tea." He called Nell's mother next. He introduced himself properly, his full name, his title, the firm, and he was careful and plain-spoken and did not say more than was necessary. He told Odalys that her daughter had come to him with something important, that she was safe, that he would have her home by 10, and that he would explain everything in person if she would allow it. Odalys was quiet for a moment. "Is my daughter in trouble?" "No," Warren said. "She did something very brave." He heard Odalys breathe out slowly. "Okay, Mr. Sutherland, okay." He went back to Nell. "We're going to meet someone," he said. "A woman I trust. We're going to tell her what you told me. Is that all right?" Nell looked at him carefully. "Are you going to be okay?" He considered the question seriously, the way it deserved to be considered. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But I think I'll be better for having heard you." She nodded, apparently satisfied with that. They took a cab to Kitsilano because Warren did not want to drive and did not want his car in a location that could be tracked easily. He was not, he told himself, being paranoid. He was being a lawyer who knew exactly what the end of the month meant in the context of estate documents and a business trip to Toronto that Sylvia herself had encouraged him to schedule. The trip had been her idea. She had said it would be good for him to meet the Toronto clients in person before the acquisition closed. She had been the one to find the flights. The hotel on Wellington Street he preferred, the dinner reservation at the place on King he had mentioned liking the last time. She had arranged everything with a warmth and attentiveness he had noticed and been quietly moved by, because things between them had been strained since January in ways he hadn't been able to fully articulate, and he had chosen to read her effort as a sign of repair. He sat in the back of the cab and looked out at the wet streets of Vancouver sliding past, and felt the particular shame of a man who has been deceived by his own willingness to be reassured. Nell sat beside him. She did not say anything. She had finished the ginger ale and was holding the empty can in her lap with both hands. "You can leave it in the cab," he said. "I don't like littering," she said. He almost smiled. "Not quite, but almost." Harriet Svensson was a compact woman in her late 50s with close-cut gray hair and the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where stillness was a professional requirement. She had 3 cups of tea ready when they arrived, and she shook Nell's hand with the same unremarkable seriousness she would have extended to an adult witness, which Warren observed and was grateful for. She let Nell tell the whole story without interruption. She asked 3 questions afterward, all precise, all relevant. What time of day? Which window faced the greenhouse? Whether the man's voice had any particular accent or quality that was distinctive. Nell answered each one carefully. Harriet looked at Warren. Do you have the estate documents at the office or at home? Both. I can access the firm copies remotely. Don't do it from your phone. Use the office system. Do you have a secure line to the IT department? I can get one by tomorrow morning. Good. She looked at Nell again. You did well, she said. Telling him was the right thing. Not many adults would have. Nell looked at the table. I almost didn't, she admitted. I kept thinking maybe I heard it wrong. Or maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. That's called doubt, Harriet said. It's very normal, and it's very useful for the people who don't want you to come forward. The fact that you came forward anyway is what matters. The next 14 days were the quietest war Warren Sutherland had ever fought. He went home that night as if nothing had happened. Because Harriet had advised it, and because he understood the logic, even if the execution required a kind of performance he found deeply unpleasant. He had dinner with Sylvia. He listened to her talk about a fundraising gala she was co-chairing in May. He told her about a deposition that had gone long. He watched her face across the table and looked for what he had not known to look for before, and found, with a sadness that settled in his chest like something cold and permanent, that it was visible now that he knew where to look. She was not nervous. That was the thing. She was warm and solicitous, and poured his wine without being asked and asked after his stomach whether the ginger ale had helped. She was the same Sylvia she had always been, and that sameness was the most frightening part, because it meant she had been practicing this for a long time. He slept on his side of the bed and did not reach for her, and told himself it was because of the early meeting. He contacted his personal solicitor. Not a firm associate, a private attorney in North Vancouver he had retained years ago for his own estate matters, and quietly initiated a review of every document Sylvia had access to. He did it through channels that would leave no trace in the firm's system and told no one at the office. He said nothing to Jeffrey. He watched Jeffrey instead. In the 2 weeks that followed, Jeffrey was Jeffrey, easygoing, precise when precision was required, took his lunch at the same sandwich place on Robson he had been going to since 1998, brought Warren a jar of the hot honey from the Okanagan market his wife had been buying, left it on Warren's desk with a sticky note that said, "Figured your stomach needed something kind." He mentioned the Toronto trip twice, asked about the hotel, said to give his regards to the clients. Warren watched and could not see the seam, but Harriet found it. 3 days before the end of the month, she called him on the secure line she had set up and told him she had something. The financial trail was obscured, but not obscured by someone who had expected anyone to look carefully. There were 2 wire transfers in the past 6 months, both from a holding account Sylvia maintained under a family trust Warren had not known existed. The amounts corresponded, when cross-referenced, with a particular account registered to a numbered company in New Brunswick. To a man named Terence Slade, who had a significant history that Harriet described with the economy of a former law enforcement professional. The second transfer had been made 8 days ago. Harriet had already been in contact with the Vancouver Police Department through channels she would not specify over the phone. She told Warren to go to the firm the following morning as normal. She told him to say nothing to anyone. "And Ashcroft?" he asked. There was a pause. "We're not sure yet," she said. "The money doesn't point to him directly. It may be he genuinely doesn't know, or he may be insulated very carefully." Warren thought about the jar of hot honey sitting on his desk with the sticky note. "All right," he said. "I'll wait." The call came on a Friday morning. Warren was in his office on the 22nd floor reviewing a contract when his assistant knocked and said there were 2 officers from the VPD requesting to see him. He told her to bring them up. He called Harriet's number and let it ring twice and hung up, which was the signal they had agreed on. The officers were professional and relatively brief. They told him that an individual matching the description of Terence Slade had been taken to custody the previous evening in connection with a contracted offense. They told him that a warrant had been executed that morning at the Shaughnessy address. Warren set down his pen. "My wife," he said. "She's been taken in for questioning, Mr. Sutherland. I'm sorry." He nodded. The window behind him showed the whole of Burrard Inlet on a clear April morning, the mountains across the water with their last snow, the freighters sitting still and patient in the harbor. "Is there someone you can call?" the officer asked. Yes, Warren said. There's someone I need to call. He called Odalis Okafor's number. She picked up on the second ring. It's Warren Sutherland, he said. I wanted to let you know, it's over. Your daughter is safe, and I'm safe, and I want you to tell her that what she did mattered. I want her to know that. Odalis was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, but not entirely. She was up half the night worrying about you, she said. I only found out last night what she'd done. I didn't know how she stopped. Thank you for protecting her. She protected me, Warren said. I want her to know that clearly. Jeffrey Ashcroft, it turned out, had known nothing. The evidence established this, and Warren believed it. And in the weeks that followed, he found that belief easier and harder in different measures, at different times. Easier because it meant he had not spent 31 years being deceived by two people at once. Harder because Jeffrey's grief, when it came, was the kind that had no structure to it. A man who had loved Sylvia like a sister, and who had to hold the reality of what she had planned against every memory of her he had, and try to understand which memories were true. They had lunch in May at the sandwich place on Robson. Jeffrey barely touched his food. I keep thinking, Jeffrey said, that I should seen something. I looked for 14 days, Warren said. I was looking specifically. I didn't see it either. Jeffrey was quiet. What will you do? Warren considered. I'll be here, he said. That's what I've got so far. The proceedings were long and thorough, and Warren allowed himself to step back from as much as possible, which was not very much. The firm continued. Contracts were reviewed and signed and renegotiated. A junior partner was promoted ahead of schedule because she had been ready for 18 months, and Warren had been delaying out of caution he no longer thought was warranted. He took the Toronto trip, not in April, but in July. He sat on the plane over the Shield and looked out at the flat geometry of the prairies, giving way to the rocks and lakes, and thought about the things a person doesn't see when they're too comfortable in their own assumptions. He had known Sylvia for 27 years. He had loved her for most of them. He did not know yet what to do with the version of her that had existed in parallel to the version he knew. He suspected he would be working on that for a long time. But he thought about Nell. He thought about a girl standing behind a concrete pillar in a Safeway parking lot, having walked from a house in Shaughnessy to find a man she had known for 3 days, because he had decided that telling the truth was more important than the many very reasonable arguments against it. He had sent her a letter in May, handwritten, 3 paragraphs, formal but warm. He had included a note for Odalis. He had offered, if Nell was interested, and if her mother agreed, to speak to her school about arranging a week at the firm in the summer. Not a formal thing, just a chance to see how it worked, to ask questions, to understand what it looked like when people used the rules honestly. Nell had written back in 2 paragraphs. Her handwriting was careful and her sentences were direct. She said she would like that very much. She said she had one question, if it was all right to ask. Did you believe me right away, or did you have to decide to? He wrote back the same day. I believed you immediately. It took me a moment to accept what I believed. Those are 2 different things, and they both matter. When you get here, remind me to tell you why. He sealed the envelope and set it in the outbox on his desk. Through the window, the harbor was silver in the late afternoon light. The mountains beyond it, sharp and very far away. He sat with it for a minute, the weight of the month, the strangeness of still being in the chair, of still being the man whose name was on the door. Then he picked up the next file and opened it, and went back to work.